Hey everyone, welcome back to Questioning Constructs, where we question our constructs head first, face down, all the time. I'm Rebecca, and this is.
What's going on, y'all? It's John.
Hey.
Welcome back. Hope everybody's doing well.
Yeah. So, John, what do you got for us today? Putting you right on.
Well, as per the norm, I've totally got a topic. It's one that I've been thinking about forever, and I've been putting a lot of thought into this, and I totally didn't think of
Quickly
this like
Googling.
just now. And I'm not like stalling for time as I
Mhm.
as I talk here.
The computer
Um,
lights up your face.
yeah, as the computer lights up my face. So, no. I sent you an image earlier this week in regards
Hmm.
to animals and their ability to see. Something that I didn't know is that tigers are considered what's called trichromats, which is also what we are. It refers to the number of cones of vision within the eye. And those cones are what provide color, or I guess our ability to perceive color. And so if you have one cone of vision, you're a monochromat, two dichromat, and three trichromat. Um, and so I thought it was interesting the fact that tigers, these predators, are trichromats. They can see in multicolor, but some of the prey that they hunt are dichromats, and they can only see colors that are like in greens, which means tigers, which are like super obvious to us because they're orange, black, and white, to things like deer and boar, they come across as black and green, which is super interesting because it must make hunting a lot easier than what we think. Oftentimes we see those chases, but something that I've never really considered is why do animals kind of like sit there and wait for the chase to start? Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of times you'll see the tiger come up, and sometimes like the prey will spot like the tiger and will still like sit there deathly still.
Mm-hmm.
um and I didn't know whether that was like a fear response, or maybe it could be that they're actually still trying to process what they're seeing as well,
Mm-hmm.
because to them it's just hidden. So I thought that was an interesting thing, especially coming off of our conversation about like what animals will we be and et cetera, et cetera. Turns out that a lot of ocean creatures, a lot of fish, are trichromats as well, so they can see in multicolor. But sharks, for example, are monochromats. They cannot see in multiple colors. They see in shades of black, white, and gray.
That's really interesting that sharks, an apex predator, only see in black, white, and gray. But I guess if you're trying to see prey move, you don't really care what color it is. I'm sure black and gray make things stand out in an ocean of blue. Something that I just put together. So, we have a lot of hunters in our area. And so, I knew that, hunters wear orange because deer can't see orange, but I didn't think about the fact that they're probably very similar to boar, or it's the same thing as tigers where they're uh what was it, dichromatic?
Yeah, they
Or
they
yeah,
can't perceive those colors. Yeah.
right. So I'm wondering if, that extends to majority of bovine creatures or herd creatures where if they're just dichromatic. Um, which would all again make sense why hunters will wear orange. And I think for your question for, are they still trying to process, or do they see and just not know what to do? I think it's a little bit of both, right? So we can think of, when you're on a walk and you see like a bunny or a deer, it'll kind of look at you, and there's that moment of like an energy exchange or lack of, where it's like, oh, apex predator, what do I do? It's the fight or freeze, fawn, fight. Oh my gosh, or what's the other one? Just like running away. But
Light.
so I think their nervous system is trying to decide what to do, and of course they don't necessarily fawn. I think you could argue that they could potentially do that. But for animals like deer, I would say that, they either freeze, flight, uh, fight, or flight, run away.
So that is what you would expect, right? You would expect, oh, this might be like prey animals, et cetera, et cetera. Uh, Lions are dichromatic. Um, and I don't think when we think of lions, we think like something kind of silly, but King of the Jungle. Even though you wouldn't
Mhm.
find lions in the jungle, I guess you'd find them in savannas, right?
Yeah.
Um, Squirrels. Not that they're predators, but they can be rabid. Squirrels are scary.
You know,
Horse
wait,
are
hold on. Something that's really interesting. Oh, wait. Lions, if they're dichromatic, um, I guess that would also help with creatures, but they also blend into the grasses. So does that mean that they can see other lions easier? Because it'd be like brown on brown or however it comes across, like they're almost the same color as the grass. So I think that's really interesting that they're only dichromatic.
uh, cats and dogs, dichromatic. Right, and we don't necessarily think of cats and dogs as prey creatures. Um, Horses are dichromatic, even though I do think those are considered prey creatures.
Hmm. Yeah, they are.
Yeah. Um, but I don't know. It was just kind of cool to go down a list. And it's kind of like vaguely leads to what I really kind of am interested in today, or what I've been interested for like maybe the last week and some change. I've been obviously I enjoy philosophy. I consider myself a pseudo intellectual, right? So I like to play around the ideas of debate. I like to every once in a while pick up a book, read something interesting, read something new, kind of store that factoid, and then kind of move on with my life. But I'm not, I wouldn't consider myself a full on intellectual in the sense that I do a lot of studying, that I'm well read. I wouldn't make those claims. But philosophy is something that I often find myself watching on YouTube, philosophy tube in a sense, different ideals, different standards of living, and how we go about our lives, and what the meaning of life is. And lately, it's been a lot of apologetics and philosophy. So a lot of like questions of like religion and philosophy, and how those like intertwine, and trying to make sense of different religions. And so anyway, that's kind of where my mind's been at for a while. And so my question is, I'm gonna really start off with like an easy kind of question, and we'll see where the conversation goes. But if I asked you to define what morality is, what would you say morality means to you?
Mm. The humanist aspect, um, just the fact that something can die. So that something, it to use like project management speak. A project is temporary, whereas a process is indefinite and ongoing until otherwise. Um, and so in that way, humans or anything that's moral, I just think when I hear the word morality, I just think of, not infinite. That there's a it only exists for a point in time, similar to a project.
That's kind of an interesting way to perceive it. So when I hear morality, and this is my thought process before I looked up the actual definition, of course. Morality to me meant the difference between right and wrong. What is like good and what is bad. And that's what I've always thought morality to be. The actual definition of morality is principles concerning the distinction between right, wrong, good, and bad behavior. So the idea of like the these sentences are not really good examples of morality. The matter boiled down to simple morality. Innocent prisoners ought to be freed. Actually, that is a good sentence that kind of illustrates it. So morality is one term, right? And again, it's the differentiation between right and wrong. And then there's kind of another term that can sit up on top of morality in, a philosophical sense, and that's objective morality. If you had to guess what objective morality refers to, what do you think that would be?
When I hear that, I think that you're looking at it from a logical perception. So, not so much defining what your own morality is, but you are objectively looking at this. So, you are looking at something hopefully without judgment, but I think that's difficult to do.
Kind of. There's almost some of what you're saying actually does speak to kind of that term of objective morality. I'm going to reference one of our conversations that we had a couple of podcasts ago when I asked a question about objective reality and objective truth within reality. Do we believe there's like objective truths within our reality? And remember, we
Mhm.
had that conversation about like, okay, for me, objective truth is like there are certain things that exist that regardless of anything, they're
Yeah.
here whether we're here or not. They're here whether we define the term or not. What is exists. There's an objective truth to that physical matter, right? Um, that's kind of where I land when it comes to objective reality. When I think of objective morality, what I'm thinking of is, are there principles that are always good and always bad, right? Are there truths that are always right or always wrong? And I think that kind of is a hard question to kind of parse or
Mhm.
answer, because I think there are a lot of things that fit into gray areas.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
and really, I asked this, and I started with the, bringing up animals and, monochromats, dichromats, trichromats, right? The reason I kind of started there is because I think we can examine this idea of like objective morality almost by looking at nature itself, right? Because nature holds certain truths, right? Regardless of whether we interact with it or not. Like chimpanzees. Chimpanzees will form groups and they'll have their own tribes and everything. And if you, as a chimpanzee, do something that goes against the tribe will isolate you, right?
Mhm.
But we wouldn't say their minds work in the same way that we do. So, how do they determine right and wrong? Is it something that they're making a determination of on like a personal level,
Mhm.
or are there certain objective, like this exists in reality, this kind of judgment that you were speaking to earlier, the
Mhm.
question of like, okay, you know so I'm curious what you have to say about that.
So, I'm actually gonna combine 2 things for a second, and I think this is a good example to start with where I'm going with this. But, okay, follow me for a second. So, going back to animals, uh I looked up, so animals can have anywhere from 1 to 16 or more cone types in their eyes, which influences their color vision and capabilities. We only have 3. So, I think, like a dragonfly is one of them that has,
I bet like spiders have a bunch, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So, like, let's just say, like, insects and other creatures have the capabilities to see way more wavelengths of light than we do. And um, we've already scientifically proven that there's wavelengths of light that we can't see, right? Like ultraviolet, but some animals can. And so my question, or I guess it's like a double question, but let's follow that train of thought for a second. So if we can't even see the whole light spectrum, but we know it's out there, when we talk about objective morality, and if we are continuously growing as a human being over our lifetime, and your perception changes depending on what stage of life you're in as you gain more life experiences, and therefore your stance on morals might also change. When people are thinking of objective morality or establishing, like, is there something that is infinitely good or infinitely bad, what exactly are you basing that on? Because we already know, like, very similar to light and not being able to see the full spectrum, is it really that we have a higher consciousness and understanding than animals, or are they just on an entirely different space? Because like maybe light, they can comprehend, or they have a different understanding that half the things that we think about don't even matter. Do you understand where I'm going with that? Like,
I kind of do, and I'll ask a couple of questions to kind of clarify your position here. So, and again, this is a conversation where ideas are probably going to change, our
mhm.
feelings on this are probably going to change. Um, so, my first question is, do you think objective morality exists?
I think it would be really difficult to prove. We had another conversation a long time ago about universal truths to be a, and I guess
Yeah.
that was kind of like talking about objective morality. For something to be an absolute truth, it has to apply unanimously across the board, but to find a scenario where that actually occurs is very, very difficult. um
So what's interesting is that I feel like you're coming from two separate places or positions here,
mhm,
which is why I find this interesting because I can also see myself falling to that as
mhm,
well, right? Where on one end we're saying, hey, these animals are operating on a spectrum that we may not be able to visibly see or understand, and they're
mhm,
operating by rules that are true for them
mhm,
and may apply to us, which to me sounds like we are saying that means there are objective morals, objectively good things,
mhm,
objectively bad things.
mhm,
But then on the other end, we're saying it would be so hard to prove that it would be hard to say, okay, objectively, something is always infinitely going to be good and infinitely going to be bad. So that gray area is kind of really
mhm,
interesting to me. For
mhm,
myself, I do think objective morality exists. I think I kind of land in that place. I haven't done a lot of research into like this topic. Again, pseudo intellectual. So I haven't looked at and any philosophers who have spoken on this. So I'm kind of speaking from ignorance. But when I think of objective good, right? There's something to be said about the kindness that we give to others, right? Um, I think that there may be negative outcomes that come from potential kindness that we may give, but mostly they're benefits. But I think I would kind of land in the space of like, even if there are negative outcomes that may come from kindness that we perceive ourselves to give, that kindness in itself is objectively good. Like
mhm,
it's always going to be good no matter where in the spectrum. Like the kindness that we are able to give, I think always kind of lands in the plus. But then I can sit here and think of situations where it's like, okay, but like, what if you are? Do you know what uh the kind of I think the term is angel of death. Do you know what that refers to?
Um, I wanted to say something that was totally not it, but yeah, like death bringers or like people who, come to like a soul collector, or I'm trying to think of like other
Kind of. Yeah, but there's kind of a more sinister
grave. Oh,
view. There's more of a sinister kind of view on it, depending on what circles you're talking about it with. There's sometimes people who kind of work in hospitals who feel like they're doing the merciful thing by bringing somebody's life to an end, right?
yeah.
Now, there's a really big question there, right? Because who are you to make that judgment, right? I
hmm
think in society we would frown upon that practice, and we do frown upon
hmm
that practice. We call it murder, right?
hmm
But I could definitely see situations where um, you know perpetuating this act of quote unquote murder, taking somebody's life, is a merciful thing that we do, right? So like, where does that land
So
in the place of the
I
moral landscape?
it's so interesting that you bring that up, because I had a thought that I was going to ask you a question, but I was going to use a different example for the same thing. So I'm going to give you the question, but then I'm going to give kind of my thinking behind it, which is the same question that you have. But do you think you can even be um, morally objective to creation, like specifically life creation or death destruction? Because,
Oh,
and here's why I say that. Because when I'm thinking about animals, right, one of the things that comes to mind in terms of like objective morality is like the killer be killed, like you're on a safari and a lion does, almost kill like a baby animal, and either it's injured or it does kill it, and you're like, oh my god, I morally I want to save this animal, I don't want to see it suffer. However, that is what we also would call natural instinct. And let me give you another example. So you had brought up like the two sides of, is it more morally right to give someone medicine to, maybe end their life if they're brain dead, or if they're struggling with a disease that they're incurable from, or like are at death's door, um or is that, can we label that murder, right? Like, and so the other example I want to give to my question of can we even be morally objective specifically on life and death is because there was, and I know I've talked about this before, but there was a show, a kind of a study of sorts, if you will, one of those camera shows where they said, is there such a thing as like, are more people black and white or are they gray? And so they set up this scene where they had a mom and her two kids as actors in a grocery store. And the scene was her kids were stealing food. And so she's going around the store, and instead of any person turning her in, they actually would go and have conversations with
I've
her.
seen
I'll
this.
pay
Yeah.
for your groceries. Hey, there's other options. Hey, I've got you. Like, don't teach your kids this, but like, we'll help you out today. Like, not a single person went and was like, hey, this lady and her kids are stealing. And so, but when you really look at that, she's the kids are stealing to actually live, like to survive. It's not like they're doing it for fun. In this scenario. So my question is like, if animals killing other animals is a natural instinct and they need it to literally live, survive, can we even be objective about that the same way of like if we need food or something to live? I thought it was just a really interesting concept. Like, do you think that there are certain topics where you cannot be morally objective on, and it's just maybe that's more falls under an area of like natural law or universal truth versus something that you can be objectively
I would
moral about?
I would say so. I guess if I were to try and parse through like some of these ideas, I would kind of say that if there is an objective morality, that means objective truth does exist, right? Because that objective morality, the differentiation between right or wrong, it existing in itself would be a guideline for um, anything that exists, right? And everybody kind of plays along that. And I kind of hate that I'm saying that because, like, instinctually, I want to fight back against that and say, like, no, there is no such thing as a objective morality. I like the idea of creating and kind of destroying that you bring into to play, mainly because when I think of good or bad, we live in a world that's defined by struggle, right? It's the basis of growth. It's the basis of natural selection. It's the basis of propagating your own species, right? Um, and you find that anywhere from plants all the way up to beasts, right, or us humans, right? And so it's almost hard to imagine that there could be universal good or universal bad that exists within this world, considering that the world is almost defined by its struggle, which almost, like, most of the time, majority of the time, 99.8% of the time, would probably be bad, right? Like, we would look at struggle, and I don't know that there's um, any point in time where we look at struggle and we would say objectively that's good, right? So, like, in the example you gave of a tiger going and catching a deer and needing to feed itself and maybe its cub, even just itself, not even a cub, it's just itself, right? Like, we're not going to ask the tiger to be vegan, right? Like, the tiger is going to hunt for its prey. It's going to want to feed itself so that it can continue living. Well, we wouldn't sit here and say the tiger is right or wrong, right? Like, because it's doing the thing that it needs to do, that it's coded to do, right? The instructions that the tiger doesn't even understand that it's following, right? Um, it's coded to do that action, that thing, in order to survive. We would look at, like, that deer dying, and we would feel bad about it, right? But does that make it bad?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And
yeah.
I think to that point too, we've talked a lot about polarity and how, like, I know I've said that polarity needs to exist for both sides to be apparent. And so you could make the argument that for humans, right? Like, so an animal killing things to survive, I think everyone, like, while you might not like it, understand that, okay, if the animal doesn't eat, it's going to die. Like, one animal is going to die, either the one who's not hunting or the one who's being hunted. Um, but for humans, I'm curious where you think the line is on being objective when it comes to whether it's a gray area or black and white, because you could argue that anything a person does is in survival, whether it's survival of the ego, physical survival, mental, emotional, spiritual, whatever survival, your body, your brain, your body, everything is wanting to survive. That's why when we go through such complex, if you've heard the term ego deaths, or when you're going through kind of like an awakening, or when you're just going through a really hard moment, everything in you is still trying to survive in some way. And so if we're making the distinction for animals that something that is just a need for them to survive is is just the natural order of things. Where is the line for humans? Because you can make that same argument. I think the thing for people, though, is we actually have space in between the two dynamics to make judgment. So is it really objective morality or is it judgment?
Actually, I kind of like where you ended that thought. Is it objective morality or is it judgment? Because I would probably side with the latter, saying that it's judgment. Because I mean, there are things that I both agree with your statement, and things that I don't know how I feel. They're
Mm,
not outright disagreements, but
mhm,
I don't know how I feel. I would argue that while yes, technically speaking, your body is actively working towards survival, whether you understand it or not. I don't necessarily think that I would extend that to the actions we take as human beings. I think I think there are some base actions that we can apply that to, but like somebody who's actively seeking out shrooms for a psychedelic experience, right? That's not necessarily out of survival. Although maybe you could make the argument that there's like a psychological need for
mhm,
that in order for personal. Uh, I don't even know, but I feel like that could be twisted in some way towards survival. I think it's an interesting question. Um, that said, when it comes to morality, the reason why I feel like it kind of falls down to judgment. I mean, morality is judgment, right? Good or bad, right? It's almost like that is always going to be a judgment. We're just asking whether there's a higher power that's passing that judgment, right? Which makes it a universal truth,
mm,
um, or if it's our own judgment, which makes it subjective all
mhm,
the time, every
mhm,
time.
mhm,
And I have to argue, or I have to think about like that, the concept that everybody's mind is in a different place. But even if you were to take away like somebody's personal development or their brain development,
mhm,
if we were to compare ourselves to animals and their ability to perceive, right? Um, we can definitely identify like they're animals with limited ability to make judgment, right?
mhm,
Like, I wonder how much judgment an ant has within its colony.
mhm,
Like, how much judgment do you get to define your short life as an ant? The decisions you make in terms of how you operate within the colony.
mhm,
Because would I've never looked into ants, but I would hazard a guess that you don't have any, right? Like, um, or maybe like bees would be an interesting one to look at, because like how do they decide what flowers to land on, right? Is there a judgment call that's being made there where there's a maybe, or is
mhm,
it like a number, right? Like,
mhm,
because this flower gives off the scent of more pollen, whether it has more pollen or not, the bee is always going to go there, such that if I had 100 bees in one area, they're all going to go for one flower,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
Like, I don't necessarily know how that works, but it feels like when we talk about this concept of objective morality, it almost kind of falls on its face. I,
mhm.
I don't I don't know that there could be, which is funny because, like I said, I started with I think there is objective
Uh-huh,
morality, and,
uh-huh.
and I said there was gonna be space to change our feeling
So
here.
I think it so I do know a little bit about ants and bees and how they operate, but I think you had something really interesting around like animals not having judgment, right? And so going back to what I was saying, like, are we not on their level or are they not on our level, even though we don't have the same awareness, perception in some ways? Um, I almost wonder if the only difference between how they operate in life and how we operate in terms of objective morality is that judgment. Like, if you think about it, if giving animals judgment, would they become more like us or would they make better decisions? And if you think about taking just the aspect of judgment away from us, like think about oh my gosh, what's a good one? Like maybe Spock from Star Trek, or what is it? Not the Avengers, but Guardians of the Galaxy, the guy who like didn't understand what a joke was or what
Yeah.
sarcasm was, like just very like taking things for face value. If
Yeah.
you have someone who, now that would
Jack.
be interesting. If you have someone who just takes things at face value and could be truly objective versus judgmental, I wonder how much closer to animals we would be in our decision making. Like, maybe that is the difference. And
I I don't know. I'll push back on that one, and the reason I'll push back on that is because we have a sense of morality, right? But just because you know something is more morally righteous, right? One decision is more morally righteous than another. I
Mhm,
can tell you that I do not always make the morally righteous choice. And
mhm.
oftentimes I go out of my way to make the morally righteous incorrect choice, right? For for gratification of
Mhm.
another what's the word? uh I don't want to say feeling. There's like a word that speaks to like innate feelings a little bit more.
Um,
Drive might be a little closer. But I may ignore my morality, right, in order to satisfy a specific drive, right? I think we can attest to this as business people, right?
mhm,
Both you and I are burgeoning entrepreneurs. We're both looking to put ourselves in that space and have successful businesses that we're operating. With that, undermine, if there's an opportunity to produce something at less of a cost to us, regardless of what the cost is to the human capital that may actually be the ones producing the item, right? There are a lot of instances where we'll make that trade-off, right? It may not be the most moral thing in the world, but we're satisfying another desire, another sense before then, right?
mhm,
So I would say, even if you were aware of objective reality, that doesn't necessarily mean that you would take it, right?
mhm. I think that also brings up an interesting question of how far do we usually go into objective morality? Like how many layers, how many levels? Because to your point, like, okay, I see that I can get something for lower cost, same quality. Am I going to take it as a business owner? Yeah, probably. But then am I also going to consider, wait, why is it lower? Probably.
Probably, yeah.
But then when you start getting into, okay, like how much
Where's that line?
yeah,
It's the
how
gray
much
zone.
research do you do? Do you do a
Yeah,
deep dive to see what's going on in the country in that specific company? Do you like
yeah, yeah. Because
so
I think you and I would agree that there is a line we wouldn't cross, right?
mhm,
We don't necessarily know what that line is directly. Like, you probably couldn't ask us and we'd give an answer. But like, if
mhm.
the line was, if you purchase this thing for cheaper, somebody loses their life. We would more than likely, I would
Yeah,
hope that
no.
we would both say no, that is incorrigible, right? Like that, incorrigible. I want to make
Incorrigible?
incorrigible. I'm
Incorrig
not encourageable. Like,
No,
we're
I
not trying
know.
to incorrigible, right?
Truly.
Like,
No.
yeah, yeah. Where we'd be discontent with that
Mhm.
outcome. We would not strive for that. Um,
On that same note though, as morbid as this is gonna sound, there's gonna be someone that's like, "Oh, well, we have too many people in the world, like I'm doing my part," type of thing, or
Thanos snap.
yeah. And
Yeah,
so it's the same thing with like what are we basing our that's where I think to come full circle with what I was saying earlier about like what are we basing our objective morality on? Like, do we have a sliding scale or do we not? And it's just, again, very up to interpretation and perception, personal perception of what your sliding scale is. And there really is no determinant. I've never looked it up to see, like, okay, like, is there a true basis for what people think is morally true, morally false, or, just like universal truths, universal falsehoods. And then why? Is it
Yeah.
just, oh, I'm basing it on, entire populace at large believes this? Am I basing it off of my studies and my own personal perception, and that has shaped the community that then, takes this as the measure? I don't think and that's the other thing. I personally don't know of a scale. And so it's really hard to say that objective morality at that point really exists, because it's so perceptionally based or personally based in each person.
So here's a question, and this will be kind of my last question that I pose to you. Not to like super dive deep into it, but just as like a kind of general idea. Do you think our concepts of whether there is objective morality is molded by our ideas of religion and spiritualism?
Ooh, that's so good.
Because I would have to imagine if I was speaking with the Pope, right? The Pope would say, well, God created the universe. And
Mhm.
so with that, he sowed objective morality. And then there's a question of whether, like, okay, does that mean he gets to break the rules that he says,
Yeah.
or what? But like, there's a lot that goes into it. But like, I would imagine different religions have different perceptions on this. As
Uh-huh.
somebody who's agnostic, right? I'm a lot more inclined to stay in the gray zone and kind of feel
Mhm.
my way through the subject rather than
Mhm.
making a determination outright.
I mean, that's a fascinating question too, because the first thing my brain said to me when you were asking that is, who first came up with objective morality? And so if it's mainly used in term like the two situations I can think of that I've come across the most in my life have been just my own personal perceptions. Again, more judgment based of like, oh, this is right, this is wrong, and religion. So like, thou shall not steal, thou shall, like the Ten Commandments,
Christianity, yeah.
creation of the world, and there's quite a few religion like that follow kind of the do unto others how you want to be treated uh type of rule. And so it does beg the question, like, was it from all of that that we got objective morality, or is it somewhere scientifically, and by scientifically based I mean just more like objectively studied, kind of like philosophy or
Like
theology, which yeah.
if we were talking about layers, is this the layer underneath or is this the layer over
Right.
top? Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like
Um,
what influenced what? Because theology, psychology, um, all of that, is, I'd have to say, probably as old as religion as well. It's not like I feel like it's not like religion came before, like many years before, and then all of a sudden we just started thinking about these things. It's probably like coincided.
That's something that I would actually like to take a look at, and I'll probably explore that at some point in time because I think that that
Mhm.
is an interesting question. Like, of the disciplines that we know of, right? What's our theory on what discipline came first?
Mhm.
I think that would be an interesting idea. But that said, my question for you all out there at home is if you could create your own objectively moral truth, what would that truth be, and what do you think both the positive outcome as well as the consequences that would come out of that moral binding to that concept, that moral truth, that kind of um, stuck in place reality binding idea. What would that be for you, and what do you think the outcomes would be of that moral truth?
Mm-hmm. And my question is, what is a moment in your life where you were in what you define for yourself as objectively moral, whether it's a, truth or a fallacy, but that the world dictates is a gray area? Socially accepted gray, or not socially accepted, but it is a gray area that is approved of as a gray area, that most of the world believes is a gray area.
Mm,
All right. Well, those are our questions. That was a good topic, John.
thank you.
Um,
I just came up with it
I,
just now,
I
right on the
know,
spot.
because we took a hard left or a hard right from animals. And all of a sudden, we're like, all right, going deep. Like I said, guys, head first, face down into our topics. We really nailed that in a
We
beautiful
definitely go
way.
face first there. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for joining us, and hope you continue to hang out with Rebecca and I.
Yeah,
It's been good. It's been good.
yeah, absolutely. All right, have a good one, guys. Bye.
Bye.